One of my favorite authors on the subject of psychology is psychoanalyst Arno Gruen. He wrote two books when he was alive: The Betrayal of the Self and The Insanity of Normality. And in this video, I want to go into the insanity of normality and just talk about how it's so relevant to this day and age and how important it is to understand these concepts that he goes into in this book. The insanity of normality is about how we suppress and repress our emotions to fit into societal norms. We start to suppress these emotions as children, and then we continue to repress them as adults because we were taught growing up not to feel and to kill off and get rid of our true selves. So our parents or our teachers say things like, man up, be strong, stop crying, act like an adult. It's like when we showed these emotions as children, we were an inconvenience to people. We were punished sometimes, depending on who your parents were and what kind of family you were raised in. But we were punished at times for expressing emotions and just being ourselves in the moment. Instead of being nurtured and being taught to honor these emotions and to feel these emotions and to therefore understand ourselves better. He also talks about how showing emotions like fear and vulnerability get us labeled as weak. So we adapt and we suppress these feelings to fit in, to gain approval from parents, teachers, society in general. But every time we suppress our emotions, we lose a little bit of ourselves, our true selves, until obviously we become adults and we've suppressed so much of our true selves that there's hardly anything left. And so in his other book, The Betrayal of the Self, this ties right into it, right? He calls this the betrayal of the self. Suppressing our emotions as children, being taught that being our true selves and being what we are in the moment is not good. It's an inconvenience, and you cannot be like that if you want to be a functioning member of society. So we trade authenticity for safety, emotional safety, social safety, and sometimes physical safety. Look at 2020. But over time, this obviously creates a deep disconnect within us, a tear. And so then he talks about how once we've betrayed our true selves, once we've basically said, okay, no problem, it's repressed, don't have to worry about that anymore, we're rewarded. Emotional repression is celebrated in our society, like busyness and self-control, toughness. And yeah, you're going to have some self-control. That's just a normal part of life. But what he's talking about here is like overly self-control, like not letting yourself feel anything, just being numb. That's what the system wants, us to just be numb. And so again, vulnerability and emotional expression are considered weak. Can't have any of that. Nope, not in this society. This is hustle, bustle, make money, grind, separate yourself, exploit other people, and do what you need to do to get to the top. A good example of this, I was actually going to make a whole video about just this topic right here, which is I hear all the time, and I'm sure you do too. You ask somebody how they've been, and they say, busy. And there's this urge to say, good, man, good. Yeah, busy, great. Why is that great? That's not great. That's not good. But most people think that's good because running away from ourselves and constantly running away from our own minds and running away from what's taking place internally is the norm. It's like the better you can do that, the better off you are, right? In society. That's what they think. That's what people think. It's so wild. It's like you're busy, so that means you've been productive, and it's all about being productive in this society, right? Being productive, working, busy, busy, busy. Why? Have we ever just stopped and thought, why is being so busy so important to us? It's like a badge of honor. Busyness is like a badge of honor. But what busyness is often is just a way to avoid ourselves, to avoid what we really need to be facing, and to avoid feeling in general. It's like a lot of people are under the impression if they're still, just still in silence, just with themselves for too long, something's going to bubble up and they're just like, no, 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 no. No, I can't risk that happening. I can't risk shame or guilt or the past or trauma or anything coming to the surface because I'm just not ready to face it, right? I don't want to feel those emotions too. That's a big one too. Like I don't want to feel the emotions that take place when something arises in silence and stillness because I can't feel those emotions. I have to be strong because that's what we're taught. I have to be strong. So if we're constantly working and running around, we don't have to confront the parts of ourselves that we've suppressed. We don't have to face ourselves. We can just stay busy, and busy equals success, right? This is exactly what Gruen calls the insanity of normality. Society takes behaviors that come from fear and disconnection and calls them success or strength. But in reality, they're signs of emotional numbness. And that numbness doesn't just affect us. It leaks out into everything, our relationships, our communities, the entire world. It literally has a ripple effect on everything. And if you've been watching my videos for a little bit, you know that I'm always talking about connecting with your higher self, connecting to what you are, connecting to who you are, being who you are, reigniting that passion, reigniting that flame. And this is the way to do this. It's to understand that this is one part of it. This is one massive psychological part of it. The suppressions of our emotions and our ability to allow ourselves to feel. And then he starts talking about all of this emotional repression or the betrayal of the self leads to violence and oppression. This is because when we disconnect from our feelings, we also lose empathy. And a lot of people lack empathy. It's all about me. We stop being able to understand or care about the feelings of others. And this lack of empathy creates a society where domination, aggression, and even war seem normal. And that's the society in which we live. This is the society that's in front of us today. War is normal. Aggression, domination, that's the status quo. That's just what people do. That's just how it is. But it's so far removed from normal. We know this because we've been doing this work. And so then Arnold talks about how violence isn't a sign of strength. It's a sign of powerlessness. And he's not talking just about like going and hurting people like physically. He's talking about violence in the workplace. He's talking about emotional violence. He's talking about systemic violence, violence against the self, and subtle everyday violence, stomping on others for a paycheck, exploiting other people, living violently. But physical violence is a part of it as well. And physical violence is seen as an outward projection of unresolved inner conflict. So Gruen talks about how individuals who are disconnected from their emotions often externalize their pain by harming others in some way, shape, or form. So talks about how violence is not a sign of strength, it is a sign of powerlessness. And obviously, when people are disconnected from themselves, they project their inner pain onto others. Look around. I see it every day in my workplace. I see it basically every single day because, again, that is just what people do, right? That's just what people do. Constantly projecting, constantly putting their own shit on other people, pointing fingers when it's just them. It's all here. And so this projection of inner pain could be in the form of aggression, controlling behavior, or even systemic oppression. And society encourages this. Like, look at how we glorify competition over cooperation or individualism over community. It's like the system is setting society up to where everybody's more and more divided, more and more separated, more and more disconnected from themselves and others. And so, therefore, you have a world full of people who feel more and more disconnected and feel like everything's divided. Well, of course, because it is. Because you are disconnected. And it doesn't matter how many people you surround yourself with and how many friends you have, you're still going to have that void within until you go within and look at this and look at those suppressed emotions and look at how you suppressed your emotions as a kid and understand that it wasn't your fault. It was not your fault. You didn't know. It was a survival mechanism. You were taught to do it. You were literally taught to do it. You couldn't have known. And so now's the time to heal. Now is the time to allow yourself to feel. Then Arno starts to present solutions in the book. talking about how we break free from the insanity of normality. The first step is to reconnect with ourselves and others. It's to recognize how societal conditioning has affected us. We ask ourselves, he asks us in the book to ask ourselves, when did I first start to suppress my emotions? When did I first start to equate busyness with value or toughness with strength? When did I start to harden myself? When did I start to kill off, seemingly kill off my true self? So then he talks about how we need to feel again. We need to allow ourselves to feel. I didn't feel for like 15 years of my life. I numbed myself out. I'm going to be sharing my story in a later video, by the way, so I'm not going to get into it now, but I numbed myself out thoroughly, and I wanted to be numb 24/7 because I was so afraid of looking at myself and looking at what I've done and looking at all the lies and deception and trauma and shame that I carried around everywhere. I did this until I couldn't anymore. And so allowing ourselves to feel again means to embrace emotions like sadness, vulnerability, fear, even. Embracing it, feeling it all the way, allowing ourselves to really go into it and explore it to understand it. Emotions are fully part of the human experience. Feeling, emotion, vulnerability, like Brene Brown in her book, Daring Greatly. She talks all about the power of vulnerability as if it's a superpower because it really is. Being open, allowing ourselves to do the things that make us feel uncomfortable, to express our passions, to just be who we are and stop playing pretend. So then finally, at the end of the book, he starts talking about empathy. He says, when we reconnect with our own feelings, we naturally become more empathetic towards others. And empathy is what heals relationships, communities, and even societies. It is the antidote to disconnection and violence. And so I wrote a little recap here. Arno Gruen shows us that number one, we are conditioned to betray our authentic selves to fit into society. Number two, emotional repression is glorified, but it disconnects us from ourselves and others. Number three, this disconnection leads to violence, aggression, and systemic dysfunction. And number four, the way out is through empathy, authenticity, and reconnecting with our true feelings. So, what society calls normal is definitely not healthy. It's definitely not what we need to be doing for the most part. And healing starts with breaking free from these false norms and seeing them for what they are and going within. And instead of running, coming back to ourselves. So, can you see any of these patterns in your own life? Any times where you have sacrificed your authenticity to fit in? I'd love to hear what you have to say about this in the comments. Please comment below with your thoughts, any video topic ideas you have for me. I'm always open to that as well. If you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, and leave me a donation in one of the links below. Also, check out my writing on Patreon. That's in the link below as well. Thank you so much for showing up with me today. I seriously appreciate all of your support. I love you all, and I will see you in the next video. Peace.